How to develop a Marco Mazzoni composition. With your photocopy, cut out the face, cut the hair off, and using white acrylic or white emulsion, dry brush or sponge to dull down. Whilst that's drying, you need to start to experiment with the materials that you've got. So on a piece of scrap paper, get your pencil crayons together and a sharpener. If you've got any watercolour pencil crayons, you may want to experiment with those, in which case you'll need a brush and a water pot. You will also need your resource sheet because you're going to need to look at that for the colour references. Make sure that all your pencils are sharpened before you start and find yourself a light peach colour to put down as a base. Although Caucasian skin is not pink as such, it does have a peach tinge to it, and there are other colours that we build up. That's what we're going to explore on this tester sheet. You could even make notes next to it to show which colours you've mixed with which, and this can be part of your sketchbook development ideas. You can make warmer colours by adding in the reds and the oranges and the yellows. You can start to look at how you can make cooler colours, maybe using browns, blues and greens. Vary the pressure, going from dark to light, and that will give you different blends as well. You're experimenting with the pressure that you put on just as much as the combination of colours. You might use the peach as a blender back over the top to try and make sure that that colour sits nicely. Here you can see I'm bringing in the blues and later the greens, just a light blue or a light green, because Caucasian skin has got sort of a blue cold feel to it. You can see it in Marco Mazzoni's work, and it's really important that you play around with those colour mixings in your development. Now if you've got a peach watercolour pencil crayon, then you can start to put a base down with that. Again, varying the pressure, dark to light. All you need to do now is get a wet brush and start to damp the surface. The paint will activate and it will start to move. You can then start to shape it and move it to where you want it to be. And if you want to create a lighter tone or for it to fade out, you just add more water to it. You can blend watercolour pencils together. If you just have one watercolour pencil, you may just want to do the peach base, completely leave that to dry, and then you can work back into it with ordinary pencil crayons. But again, this is where that tester page is really useful, because you can see which materials you prefer and why. Make sure you completely leave any colour washed or watercoloured areas to dry before you start to work back in with pencil crayons. But again, you can lightly build up the colour mixing over the top in the same way as you would do with just the pencil crayon. Having a watercolour base can often mean that it's got a smoother base colour to it than just using pencil crayon. Going back to the collaged image that we did earlier, the paint should now have dried and some of the edges may have lifted a little bit. So just use your glue stick, turn the paper around, lift up the edge and apply the glue to it in the air. Don't apply the glue to the paper that you're sticking it to, because that will mean it's difficult to work back over if you get glue on that surface. Make sure that all the bits are stuck down, because it'll be much easier for you when you come to draw over this at the next stage. Now we need to look at applying colour over the top of this copy. So we're starting to put down the peach base, look at directional marks, getting those curve marks in there. But remember, you're not going over the eye area or the forehead, because as you can see in Marco Mazzoni's work, it's almost bleached. It's very white in those areas. So we must remember to leave those bits. I've done the first half with just a pencil crayon. Now I'm looking at doing the other half with a watercolour pencil crayon. It doesn't matter which you use, and you will have preferences to which you prefer. I'm building up that base. I'm now going over the top with the watercolour just because I can spread it a little bit smoother with the water when I add it on. Again, using the brush to slightly move the direction of that watercolour paint to help me show form through the directional marks that I'm applying. As you can see, I'm moving around the face, building up different areas at different times. I've decided I'm just going to bring a tiny smidge up along the hairline on there, but certainly not onto the forehead. And I'm starting to add colour now underneath the nose, the Cupid's bow, sort of around the chin and moustache area. Once we've got that colour base down, we do need to start to think about the colours that we're going to blend over the top. So again, it's really useful for you to look back at those experiments you did earlier on. You will need any wet paper to dry before you work back into it. Otherwise, the paper is going to be too fragile and may rip or bobble or come apart if the surface is still damp. So make sure that you have enough patience to wait for any wet bits to dry. You can always use a hairdryer to speed up that drying process, especially if you're at home. And then, as you can see here, we will start to build up the colours over the top with pencil crayons. Adding the warmer colours to the lips, I then start to come in with the light blue and light green to add some of those darker, cooler tones to the skin. I'm going back over with my peach to give a blending effect, and then bringing in things like purples into some of those darker areas. So I'm really starting to blend and mix the colours together. When I think I've finished, I then review how it's looking. I can still see the eyes quite clearly through here, so I can now build up a little bit more white paint. I didn't want to do it at the beginning because I didn't want to be left with any sort of dramatic edge, but now I can see how I'm building it up. So I'm applying it with my fingers first of all, and then I get a brush and start to control it a little bit more with the brush to even it out so I don't end up with big lumpy bits of paint. It smooths the surface back out. Having looked at the Marco Mazzoni images, I decided that actually I probably need a bit more white in the forehead. So that's the next stage, is that I apply a little bit more higher up with the paintbrush. As I say, this can be white acrylic or it could be white emulsion, the stuff that you paint your walls with, depending on what you've got. But we're just trying to give that bleached effect to the forehead and the eyes, making it easier for us when we come to do our developments. Obviously, this paint will need to dry, and you will need to start to think about the sorts of images that relate to your celebrity that you want to bring into your circular composition. So this is a good time to get that ready.